Hello, welcome to the Vineyard Church podcast. For more information, visit us at vkcwest.com.
All right, so we are in a message series called Kingdom Living. And so it's the idea, it sounds complicated, but really, when Jesus came to the earth, God, in a body, he became one of us, he invaded with God's kingdom. Not that it wasn't here before, but he came in a tangible way. And so God's kingdom's invading in time and space. But not in its fullness. Like, think of God's kingdoms as the way God would want things to be in every area of life. And so there's a term like the already but the not yet. So in the Sermon on the Mount, and really in all of Jesus' teaching, what he's speaking of is he's speaking of, I want you to live the way things ultimately will be now, even though they're not that way. And the New Testament's all like that. He declares us righteous, and he declares us salt and light, and he declares us good, and all sorts of things. And then he gives us power to live that way. And so in the Sermon on the Mount, we've walked through a series over the last several weeks, if you've been with us or not, of Jesus basically saying like, hey, the old way of righteousness, or the old way of being right with God and other people, was all about just like checking off a list. Like, this is the way people did it in his time. Just like checking off a list, and it was about outward performance. And basically kind of taking away what was really going on the inside, and just saying, hey, if the outside performs, we're good. Even though my heart is far from God, I'm doing all the outward stuff, so it appears to everybody that I'm good. And that was kind of what people, looked at. But Jesus is going deeper into this. And we ended our time with this. We ended with Jesus saying these words, be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. And this is what he meant by is he's saying the righteousness that God brings to you, that Jesus brings to you, is built upon this intimate relationship with your heart, with God's heart. In other words, that it comes from the inside and then works itself outside. That the outside can be a total mess, but God's working on the inside. But what we do a lot of times is like, man, I got to really clean up this outside because it's looking really bad. And God says, will you let me work on the inside, and then I'll work it out. And so that's the picture. And in the picture with being perfect is the idea that God is like, be like your Father. He's trying to make you like him. So if you say, well, what is God doing in my life? Well, in your workplace, and your family, and your school, and your relationships, like he's really trying to make you like him. And you say, wait a minute, I want to be myself. Well, your whole self, like who you really are meant to be, is found in that relationship of being like him. You don't lose yourself, but as you surrender your life more and more to Jesus, you will become more like you'll live your life the way that Jesus would live your life. You're still you. And so this is all the stuff that Jesus is packing into. But in chapter 6, we're going to go through these things, not today, but he talks about giving to those that are in need. He talks about how to pray. He talks about fasting, or giving up things to make space for God and allow him in. He talks about money and worship. And then lastly, he talks about worry. And as I was looking about all these things and I was thinking about this, it's kind of like Jesus is laying out, like, this is the way things are like this is how we do life at my house. Right? You remember being a kid, or maybe you still experience it now. You go to somebody else's house, you're like, oh, this is different than my house. I remember like for dinner, we always sat and just around the table, and I'd go to a friend's house and they've got TVs going and they got TV trays and they're all in front of the TV, or they would sit outside or they do different things, or certain people would pray before their meals. Other people wouldn't. Some homes you have to take your shoes off. Other ones, you don't take your shoes off. All these different things go to people's homes. But it got me thinking about what I call the best weekend ever for a boy. And I don't remember who the boy or his family was. I remember the place, but I don't remember exactly where it was. But the Luke Bryan song, If You Like Country. If you don't like country, just bear with me. But the song is hunting, fishing, and loving every day. You guys know that song? Hunting, fishing, loving every day. That's what this weekend was like. I went to his house, and first thing, the dad and the son said, "Do you do this at your house?" And it was all these things that we kind of dabbled with and did stuff like, but it was like, guns, a bow and arrow and hunting and all this stuff. And do you do this at your house? And I just said, yeah, all the time. And just, it didn't matter what it was. You shot this big of a gun? Oh yeah, all the time. Because I'm just saying to myself, if I say yes, then I get to do all this stuff that maybe we may or may not do fully at my house, but we're doing it this weekend. So we hunt, fish, and they just kept coming like, you guys do this? Yeah. And the next, I'm just waiting for, you guys wrestle mountain lions? Yeah. Oh yeah. It's just, so that weekend, the food, like, do you guys eat this food? Yes. And so it was just this boy fest. I look at it that way. But that's how they did things at their house. Like that's all the stuff that they did. And I actually did that at most people's homes when they'd have me over. Like I'd get myself in trouble sometimes too, like there was an Italian family in our town. And so they even, like in elementary school, they'd say, they'd have wine with their, they were very, very Italian, wine with their dinner. And like, you guys have wine with your lunch? Absolutely. And so it went bad. So anyways, that's not what we're here for, is to hear my poor choices as an elementary school student. But we all have certain ways of doing our lives at our homes. And what Jesus is doing is he's saying like, hey, if you're going to be a part of my family, because that's what he's doing when he speaks of righteousness, we can use all these religious terms, but he's really saying like, hey, you're a part of my family now. This is how we do things. These are the things we focus on. And so in verse 1 of chapter 6, he starts to dial in the way that he in his household actually operate. And we see that he talks about a reward from our Father in heaven. And so it says this, be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others, to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when he says your righteousness, he's talking about like the morality, the righteousness that's within you, the relationship you have with God, the focus of your life. Like try not to like put that in front of others. That's what he's trying to share. But Jesus' family righteousness lived out, like expressed, is to be done with care. So it's actually something that he says, be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. And so it's not that people can't see your relationship with God or to see your righteousness, but the warning comes when it says you're focused on being seen by others. And the idea is that like putting on a show for people. In other words, that I'm taking this act or this righteousness, the way that I live, and I'm wanting to be seen by other people, so that they would give me their attention. And that's really kind of the way of the world is make a show, look for the reward of attentions of humans, and really ultimately it's like looking for the approval of others too. So I'm going to take my relationship with God, this intimate thing with God, and now I'm going to submit it to the world, and I want approval of that they would see me as righteous, that they would see me as good. And so that's kind of the picture that Jesus is going at. But, you Bible students, you may be thinking, wait a minute, Cody. A few weeks back, we looked at Matthew chapter 5, verse 16. And this is what Jesus is recorded as saying there. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Now, wait a minute. Jesus is saying here, let them see. One, he's talking about different things. He's talking about deeds, and he's talking about light, and then he's talking about righteousness. But notice, though, in verse 16 of chapter 5, he says, let your light shine, not shine a light on your good deeds. There's a difference, right? There's kind of, and it's kind of something that is like happens all throughout, just not in the church or not amongst Christians. It's just like, if you do something, it's just not enough to do the good deed. You need to tell people that you did the good deed, right? Because you're supposed to shine your light. But Jesus isn't talking about that. And when Jesus talks about good deeds or righteousness, the good deed or righteousness has a light of its own. In other words, you do good deeds, you serve, you love, you express this relationship with God, but that in itself is enough. If it's truly a good deed, if it's truly something that helps humanity, it will bubble up the effect of it and work in people's lives. But there seems to be kind of something where churches and people, and it's like, well, hey, we got to, all right, let's, and then because we got to let people know. That's the quick way. But that story, like the hare and the turtle, where they're racing, right? And the hare just bursts out, and the turtle just kind of slow and steady, right? And every time you read that story, who wins? The turtle. Slow and steady wins the race every time. And so you try to, make stuff happen. But the way God works, the way he works in your life and he works in my life and he works in a community is he works slow and steady. Slow and steady. He works and he changes it over time. And so, we all have like these big, bullhorns of social media and other things in life. And so we want to make it happen quicker. Well, look, do you see? And yet God's like, hey, I'm going to work slow and steady in you. I'm going to work slow and steady in the community. I'm going to work slow and steady in your neighborhood. And I'm going to change things that way. And so Jesus says, I do that sometimes too. Yeah, I was back there. I don't know if you heard me. I was making all kinds of noise and stuff. What Jesus is saying is he's saying that a reward, when he says in the latter part of verse 1, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So if you seek to do your righteousness, your relationship with God, and to be seen for approval of others and for other people to say, wow, man, that person really knows God. Or wow, they're really generous, or they're really this. He says, you don't receive your reward from your Father in heaven. Now, what he's talking about is he's saying that there's a natural reward that comes from this righteousness from God in living life the way that he does. And he's saying that you lose that if you seek the show from people. That people would look and say, wow, you're really amazing. You lose it is what he's saying. So, think about that. You miss the thing that God has for you, but you get that from others. Right, and we see this. We see this in life, right? Think of people that are just super famous, athletes, actors, and their face is just everywhere, and people can see them, and everybody feels like they know them, and they're the show, but then when most of them, when they're honest, if they don't have a deeper relationship with God, they'll tell you, man, I'm empty. Everybody feels like they know me. I'm seen. I'm famous. Everybody sees me. I have everybody's attention. But I'm empty because they're what? They're missing that true reward that comes from the Father. And you may have experienced things like this in your life, but it's kind of like putting out a front. You put out like an activity of things, but it's lacking. And when I was about 5 or 6 years old, there was this girl named Christy, and I think she was 6. I think I was 5. And so I was like, man, and I liked her. And so we had horses and land over at my house. And so I invite her over, and I got this idea in my head, my dad's a cowboy, so I need to show her that I'm a cowboy too. So we had this old mare, Sis, brown, beautiful horse, and just so I got in my head that I would climb up on the fence, and Sis was over near the fence, and I would just hop on Sis and just go for it and show Christy what a good cowboy I was. And so I, Sis was over near the fence. I said, "Watch this." I climb up there, and I don't just easily just kind of, slowly go on Sis, but I jump on Sis, grab hair, and just, let's go. And I lasted about 6 feet, and and I was on the ground and bucked off, whatever. And so here's what I'll confess to you: I wasn't a real cowboy then, and I'm not a real cowboy now. There's certain like things that Willie Nelson and Merle Haggard and all these guys sing about, that when they sing about a real cowboy, that's a real cowboy. There's certain rewards that come from it, and just acting like one doesn't have it. And that's what Jesus is getting at. Like, you can act all day long, but if you don't really have it and you're just looking at it from people, then you're lacking. You're not going to be satisfied. And so Jesus goes into, this is really a preface, that part, for the next few weeks. But today he goes into remembering those that are in need, or remembering the poor. So in verse 2 it says, "So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, to be honored by others. Truly I tell you, they have received their reward in full." So notice that it's assumptive. Jesus assumes that if you were a follower of his, that a certain portion of your resources you set aside to give to those that are in need, for those that are poor. Whether proactive or reactive, that you view the 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 or whatever your resources that you have monthly, or whatever the resources you have in the bank, or whatever the physical things you have, or the food in your pantry, or whatever it is, or the change in your car, like that you view part of that for those that are in need. And the idea is the idea of alms, that you view taking a part of what you have and give it to those that are in need. And that when there is a need happening around you, that you look at it and say, well, I can help with that. I can help with somebody that's in need. And the focus is on the poor, and I don't think it's just poor economically. I think it's any situation. So you also would look at your energy and say, well, I can give of my time, I can give of my physical energy, to help other people and do that. So Jesus just assumes that, because he doesn't say if you give to the needy, but he says when you give to the needy. It's applicable in all sorts of things. I've heard stories of, kids at school, and, they walk, and if you pay attention, like at lunchtime or break or that sort of thing, you look and you say over and over again, while everybody's eating lunch, that guy only has a little something, or that girl only has that, or they're sitting by themselves and they don't have anything. And I've heard stories of like, hey, I shared my lunch with them, or, over and over because they didn't have it, or I made sure that they got, school lunch, or this sort of. In other words, if you pay attention, there's needs around all of us that God says, hey, I want you to share those things. So Jesus shares that. That's a principle that, everything, a part of what you have is always for the needy. But then he gets into the substance of our character with it. He says, do not give like the hypocrites. And so a hypocrite, in the term that was used in Greek, was this idea, hypokrates, and so it was that, they're actors back in the day for plays and theatrical moments. They didn't have tons of actors, so they would put on one mask, and they were that character, and then they put on another mask, and they were that character. And so the idea was you don't know, you're not really the person you say that you are. But in Jesus' day, it got even more narrowed in. It was this idea of being a role player. In other words, the world is my stage. And wherever I go, I can just play whatever role that I want to put myself into. And it's not necessarily focused on the role for others, but it's like, I'm going to play this role because I really look great. And this really, pushes me through. And so that's what Jesus is talking about. So apparently, I mean, he's probably like stretching things. The idea that somebody would have somebody play a trumpet when they give a certain amount to the needy. There's all sorts of different ideas. Some people think that when people would give to the poor, there were these big colander things, and that they were called the trumpets, that when you poured them in, that the noise would make. And, so, you go pour your change in, and it counts it at the store, and goes through. Kind of like that, like, oh, wow, they're pouring in a lot to the poor. But the idea is that these people would give to the needy, and they wanted everybody to know what they were doing. They wanted everybody to know that they were righteous because they were giving to the needy. And the problem is this, and this is what Jesus is getting at. He's narrowing in more and more. Remember, this is about a household. This is the way that we do things in our house. Is if you take the idea of a hypocrite and playing a role, and then with the idea of giving, is that basically what's lacking is that they're trying to communicate. Because giving alms and caring for the poor is something that's near to God's heart. They're trying to communicate that their heart is close to God because they're doing this thing. But then God says, that's what's lacking. You're doing the act of giving to the poor, but your heart is far from me. You're doing the things that are within the proximity of me and the things that I do, but your heart is far from me. And, you may say like, man, God is a hard master. I mean, isn't it enough that I'm just doing the things that are important to him? I mean, why doesn't he just be happy with that? But he's not, because he loves you. And he wants you to be the real person that he made you to be. And so as he calls you into these things, and if we do them without that relationship, that's why he's saying there's no reward, because that's great. You get attention from other people from doing this, but it's a farce. I mean, that's anything that has the fingerprints of God on it that's good. If we do them and we get attention for them, but then there's not that relationship with God, Jesus says, man, you got your full reward. And what's hard is many times when we do those things, we're like, yeah, God's really impressed with this. Or, I think I'm going to be okay because I did this thing. Maybe this balances out that other thing, Maybe this balances out all the things that I did on boy weekend, Maybe I'm okay now. It just doesn't operate that way. God is always focused on where is your heart in relation to his heart. And so why not just do things for the attention of people? Well, in the end of the verse, it says you've received your reward in full. You'll be honored by others, but you won't be honored by God if you don't do it with him. So in verse 3, it says, but when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. So this is totally impossible to do. Because, he's getting to the point of saying, look, in yourself, don't even reference yourself and how you're doing this, and don't even say to yourself, well, I feel really good about this. He's going to a total extreme, and he's saying well, somehow don't let this hand know what this hand's doing, and that, and you say to yourself, well, this is impossible. That's the point. He's getting down to there's a real way to do this, and doing it in a way that you're not going to totally be able to do something in total secret. You're not going to totally be able to do something that you feel totally that way. But what he's getting at is for you to give thoughtfully and with the whole of you, your whole self, not referencing yourself I'm pretty great. Yeah, that was really good what you did. You're really awesome. He's not saying that. What he's saying is when you give to the needy, reference God. Go back to him. And say, God, what do you think about that? What do you think about, I helped those people. I heard that they needed something. I did it. What do you, I think that's really great. Well, why? Why? I love those people. And they asked me today for help. And I love the look on their face that I answered their prayer through you. Like, that's the real joy. Do you see? That process with God is more important than just stuff happening. And so the result of this, if you look at will you put verse 4 back up there, verse 3 and 4? It says, so that your giving may be in secret. So if you give thoughtfully and whole in referencing God, that your giving may be in secret, then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. So here's the thing. You're making a trade. You're making a trade for the attention of people for the attention of God. And the way that God meets you is in this secret place. So this is why you want to give this way and live this way and serve this way, is because then it's in this secret place where it's private. And this can be taken to extremes, just like, look, my relationship with God's my own. That's not what it's talking about. But it's talking about like this way that you serve or give or help others or do these things, that God says, I want to meet you in the secret place. I want to meet you in this place. And this term, this phrase is used for the next few weeks when it talks about prayer, when it talks about fasting. And so it's a message for you and I. It's a message that says, will you have a private life with me? He says, will you have like a private life with me that is just you and I? And I struggle with this, because we had a Bible study class last week. We were talking about how we read the Bible and stuff. And I struggle with it because I'm constantly in the Bible, right? Because I teach the Bible. But then I'll have like my specific time in the mornings. I read the Word, and then I go to this, and I write down stuff, whatever. And I constantly sit there. I'll get something like, oh man, they're going to love that. Oh, I can't wait to share that with everybody. And then God says, hey, can you just like let it be you and I? Can you? Because and he showed me his heart on it. He's like, hey, this is just like, I'm just loving you, Cody. I'm just speaking to you. And if it's constant, like, hey, thanks for telling me that, I'm going to go tell these people. Do you see? And so he wants this private life with you where you know him and he knows you. And so it says that he'll reward you. And this has been really distorted over the years. I mean, you may have heard teaching, but anytime we see reward, we're like, all right, what can I get? Like if I gave like $100 to help the needy, is it like, there's things about like God will return to you 100-fold. Does that mean I get this amount of money? This is incredible. What a great return on my money. The stock market's down. This is the way to go. I'm just going to do this. And in thinking like that, we again go off in a different direction. Because, what if the reward of like giving to the needy, giving to the poor, giving, meeting a need in people, what if the reward was just that God made things more the way he wanted them to be? What if the reward was that needs were met by people that God loved? And you say to yourself, well, that's it. Yeah. And if you can rejoice in that, you're not far from the kingdom. Because the things that are near to God's heart are now near to your heart. In the noise of this world and the noise of all the activity and the attention of people and the popularity and all these things, you say, wow, that's fading away. The things that are really most important are more important. So, but it does say a reward for you. And God's reward is found in secret or private or hidden place. Many times it says that he would go off to a quiet place and be with his Father. Even though, he's raising the dead, he's healing the sick, and he's opening the eyes of the blind, and he's doing all this stuff, and people are like, give us more, do more. And yet he would go and be with his Father and just be in that quiet place. That was his reward, is just to be with him. God's reward for you is found in relational presence. Right? You may know the story of Mary and Martha, two sisters, and Jesus is at their house, and you talk about like wanting to have it clean and having things good and, make things in their place. And one of the sisters was just running around, making sure everything was ready, and maybe they were having a meal and getting everything ready and stuff, and Jesus is there. And then her sister was just sitting at the feet of Jesus. And depending on how you're wired, that bugs you. Either one, the one that's running around, you're like, well, why can't you just sit with Jesus? And then if you're wired to run around and make sure everything's set, it bugs you that, well, why is she just sitting there? There's so much that needs to be done. And that's what the sister that was running around said. And Jesus said, you're worried about many things, yet only one thing is needed, and she's chosen that, which is to sit here. What if we had such a perspective that okay, Jesus took loaves and fishes and multiplied them for thousands of people to eat. Yet I've got all this stuff that I need to do. And Jesus says, well, can you just sit with me? I think I can take what you have, and I think I can make it enough for others. I think I can do that. Can you just give it to him and trust him? And then, God's reward is found in doing what the Father is doing. Jesus said he could do nothing apart from what his Father was doing. And so for him, this outflow and what he was doing was all about seeing what his Father was doing, and then he would join in those things and do that. Do you know why, Stephen talked about what we do with the youth here? Do you know why? It's because it's what the Father's doing. God is reaching this community in Kansas City and other places, and just not with what we're doing, but through other churches and people too. And I'm seeing it as I travel across the country too. And is that God is reaching this generation. It's what he's doing. And when we came out here 4 years ago, that's what God spoke to us. He says, I want you to pour into the youth. I want you to love the youth of this community, because I'm going to reach this community, and I'm going to work backwards, and I'm going to reach parents and grandparents through the youth, through the young people. That's why us as a church is doing things, are doing things with young people. It's because that's what the Father's doing. And we do the same thing that if he said, hey, I'm working in the lives of the older generation. Okay, well, let's pour in there. And so that's where the reward is to be a part of what God is doing. You see, a lot of times we say, well, we'll just do all these different things, all these different good ideas, and this church did this over here. No, we want to do what God's doing. God's doing something, and so we want to be a part of that. So that's where the reward is do that with him. And then we also see it in God's will, or his kingdom come. At the end of this chapter, it says, seek first the kingdom of God, and all these other things will be added unto you. And so the reward is to be a part of what God is doing in his life. And there's nothing better than that. Nothing better than that, to be a part of what God is doing. If you look at your life today and you say, man, my life is boring, or my life doesn't mean anything. Ask Jesus today, Jesus, what are you doing? Can I be a part of it? What are you doing in my household? What are you doing in my home? What are you doing in my school? What are you doing in my workplace? Can I be a part of it? I've never not had him answer that prayer. And I've never heard anybody that asked him that prayer, him not answer them. He's doing stuff, and he loves to take part with you. And my dad, the cowboy, real cowboy, he lives out in Colorado and has some acreage outside of Colorado Springs. And so I go visit him a couple times a year. And he has a system in the things that he does. And he has horses, and he likes horses better than people. So if you ever meet him. So, and horses are pretty amazing. But he he has this rhythm where he does chores in the morning and chores in the evening. And so when I go there, and then he has some dogs. And so when I go there, there's all kinds of things that I'd like to talk about and do, and we talk about those some. But if I'm truly going to be in the life of my dad, I join in with the chores. And so we'll go down to where the horses are, and so, we'll both, pick a shovel or a pitchfork, different things, and so we'll pick up the horse's poo with the wheelbarrow, put it in there, do that, and then when we get done with that, and it's something I've done with him since I was a little boy, probably one of the first things he taught me, right? So I know how to do that. But as we do it, we talk. And if the horses need some hay or they need something, different things, and it's not fantastic. It's not like, I'm walking around telling people about that, except for right now, In other words, like, boy, this amazing thing or whatever. But the reward is that I'm with my dad. And I'm doing the things that he loves to do in his life. And it's consistent. Every time I go there, I just join in what he's doing. And I find that our best conversations are in those times that I join what he's doing. I find that he learns more about me, I learn more about him. And so it's actually that simple with God. He's not hiding from you, but he is doing certain things. Today, one of the things we're learning is he cares for those that are in need, the poor. And so ask him, Father, where are you caring for the poor? Who are the needy around me? Show me how I can join in with you. Because that's really what he wants to get to. Is he wants to get to the point that your heart is linked with him and you're with him.
Thanks for listening this week. If you are looking for ways to serve, give, or get connected, go to vkcwest.com.